The jeep stopped at the village edge, Rotenberg, British Zone, Germany. November 3rd, 1947. Sergeant Thomas Wright stepped down onto cobblestone streets he hadn't seen in 2.5 years. Through morning fog, he could see women emerging from damaged houses, faces he recognized. None of them expected him to return. One whispered what they all thought: "You came back." To understand why Wright's return seemed impossible, we need to go back 30 months. May 7th, 1945, the war was ending. Wright's unit, 7th Armored Division, the Desert Rats, had fought from Normandy through Belgium into Germany. They'd liberated concentration camps, seen cities reduced to ash. By early May, they were processing surrenders near Rotenberg, all a village 40 kilometers south of Hamburg that had somehow survived mostly intact. Wright was 28, a carpenter from Yorkshire before conscription in 1940. He'd served 5 years, seen North Africa, Italy, France, Belgium, Germany. He was tired in ways sleep couldn't fix. But he was also part of occupation administration now. Montgomery's orders were explicit: keep clear of Germans, no fraternization. The reality proved different. Rotenberg needed governance. The Nazi mayor had fled. Local administration had collapsed. Wright's unit appointed a new mayor, Herr Fischer, a shopkeeper who'd never joined the party. Fischer assembled teams, police, sanitation, repair crews. Wright coordinated with him daily through an interpreter, making sure basic functions operated. The village had perhaps 800 residents, where maybe 200 were men, mostly elderly or disabled. The rest were women, children, and a handful of returned Wehrmacht soldiers. The war had killed Rotenberg's men across 6 years of fighting. What remained was a community of widows trying to survive winter with no fuel, limited food, and houses needing repairs they couldn't perform. Wright noticed one woman particularly, not romantically. He had a wife in Yorkshire waiting for his return, but professionally, she was organizing the other women, coordinating repair work, managing food distribution from British supplies. Her name was Margareta Schroeder, 32 years old, widow. "Hey dear, you have to follow us now so you get more of our World War II stories we document. Help us hit our target of 10K followers before the end of this month. Also, don't forget to like and share to your friends too." Now let's continue our video. Her husband had been killed at Stalingrad in 1943. So, quick thing, or Schroeder spoke some English, learned before the war when she'd worked as a hotel receptionist in Hamburg. She became the unofficial liaison between British administration and village women. Wright found himself working with her daily. Not fraternizing, he told himself, just administration. By June 1945, fraternization rules were being routinely ignored across the British zone. Soldiers formed friendships with German civilians, helped with repairs, shared rations when official supplies fell short. The brass pretended not to notice as long as order was maintained. Wright helped Rotenberg through summer 1945. His engineering background proved useful. He showed German women how to repair roofs safely, how to shore up damaged walls, how to jury-rig water systems when pipes froze. He wasn't supposed to do this, but Montgomery's headquarters was 60 kilometers away and winter was coming. In September 1945, Wright's unit received redeployment orders. The 7th Armored was being partially demobilized. Wright was going home. Occupation duties would be handled by garrison units replacing combat troops. Before he left, Schroeder approached him at Fischer's office. Through halting English, she thanked him, not for himself specifically, but for what his presence had meant. "You could have been cruel," she said quietly. "We were enemies. You had reason, but you chose to help instead." Wright didn't know what to say. He'd just done what seemed necessary, kept people alive through winter. That wasn't heroism, that was basic humanity. He left Rotenberg on September 22, 1945, returned to England, was demobilized in October, went home to Yorkshire to his wife, to his old job at the carpentry shop, to a life that was supposed to resume as if 5 years hadn't happened. But it had happened, and Rotenberg stayed with him, stayed in memory constantly. And your memory, just hit that subscribe button. Through winter 1945 to 46, Wright followed news from Germany. Food shortages worsening. rations reduced to near starvation levels, 1,000 calories daily. In March 1946, the British zone was costing taxpayers millions. Reconstruction was slow. Displaced persons were flooding in from Eastern Europe. The occupation that was supposed to be temporary was becoming permanent. Wright thought about Rotenberg, about Schroeder and the other widows trying to survive winter with inadequate food and fuel, about children growing up in ruins. He thought about Pfizer trying to administer a village with no resources. In April 1946, Wright made a decision that his wife thought was madness. He'd volunteer for the German Civil Labour Organization, a new British program hiring civilians to work in the occupation zone. Carpenters were needed. Reconstruction required skilled tradesmen. The pay was modest, but that wasn't the point. His wife didn't understand. You served 5 years. You came home. Why go back? Wright didn't have a good answer, just a feeling that the work wasn't finished, that walking away meant leaving something incomplete. He signed up in May 1946, was processed through GCLO administration, was assigned to reconstruction teams in the British zone, requested assignment near Hamburg, near Rotenberg. The request was granted by July 1946. Wright was back in Germany, but this time as civilian contractor, not soldier, working for British Occupation Administration, helping rebuild infrastructure, teaching German workers carpentry techniques, coordinating reconstruction projects. He didn't go to Rotenberg immediately. Work kept him in Hamburg for 16 months. But in November 1947, his contract included a project in Rotenberg, repairing the village school that had been damaged by artillery fire in 1945, which brought him back to that November morning. Stepping out of the jeep, seeing faces he recognized, watching realization spread as women recognized him. "You came back," Schroeder said at first, but others echoed it. Disbelief, confusion. Why would an Englishman return to a German village that had been enemy territory 2 years prior? Wright spent 6 weeks in Rotenberg, rebuilt the school with German laborers he trained, repaired houses that had deteriorated through 2 harsh winters, showed the village how to properly insulate buildings using available materials. But more than construction, his return demonstrated something that Nazi propaganda had spent years denying. That the enemy could choose humanity over hatred, that someone who had every reason to walk away could choose instead to return, not from obligation, not from orders, but from simple human decency. Schroeder asked him one evening why he'd come back. Wright struggled to explain. "I left thinking the work was finished," he said finally, "but it wasn't. You were still here, still struggling. I had skills that could help. Oh, so I came back. That's all. That's enough." Wright left Rotenberg in December 1947, returned to England, to Yorkshire, to his wife, who'd waited through 18 more months of separation. He'd never returned to Germany again, but the 6 weeks he'd spent there in late 1947 would matter more than he knew. Rotenberg rebuilt slowly. The school reopened in 1948. Houses were repaired, infrastructure was restored. By 1949, when the Federal Republic of Germany was established, the village was functioning again. Schroeder would remarry in 1950, a returned Wehrmacht soldier who'd been in Britain. She'd have 2 children, work as a school secretary, live until 1989, long enough to see the wall fall. She would tell her children about the British sergeant who'd returned, not because he had to, not because anyone ordered it, but because he'd chosen to finish what he'd started, to help people who'd been enemies rebuild lives worth living. The story matters because it complicates the narrative. The occupation wasn't simple. British soldiers weren't uniformly kind. German civilians weren't uniformly victims. Everyone was compromised by war's complexity. But within that complexity, individual choices still mattered. Wright could have stayed in Yorkshire, could have left Rotenberg to struggle through reconstruction alone. Instead, he'd chosen to return, to help, to demonstrate that enemies could become something else when the killing stopped. And sometimes in the smallest gestures, in the choice to return when no one expected it, humanity found ways to rebuild what war had destroyed. Not just buildings, but trust. Not just infrastructure, but the possibility that people who'd been taught to hate each other could choose instead to help each other survive.